Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing a documentary called The Painter and the Thief. Now this is actually about 2 days from release by the time I am recording this. For everybody else, if you're watching this, it should be released by the 22nd of May. So if it's that time or later, you can go check this out streaming on a variety of platforms. I believe it's going to drop on Hulu. And then you can also go check out Neon Films, which have been producing a lot of interesting stuff over the last few years. If you want to find The Painter and the Thief, or obviously just look it up, you should be able to find a video on demand pretty easily. So, what is The Painter and the Thief? The Painter and the Thief is a really interesting documentary that has a good hook right out of the gate. So one thing I've talked about this before on reviews of documentaries, you need to have access, you need to have an interesting story to tell that maybe is unusual or people aren't aware of, and even better if it has some sort of an emotional or arc for the people or the subjects involved, makes it even a better documentary. In this case, it starts out with two works of art being put up on, being put up and done in a gallery. They're out in the window display. They're very large pieces, so like, I don't know, 10 feet by 10 feet approximately, something like that. And immediately you are shown a surveillance footage of two men stealing these works of art, these paintings, oil paintings, I do believe. So you would think that this mystery is going to be finding who stole these works of art. And very quickly, that is not the case. So there is surveillance footage, and the surveillance footage is good. So the faces are very visible. And within, the first couple minutes of the documentary, the painter is at the courtroom. You're not seeing footage at this point. You're just seeing they kind of do almost like the courtroom sketch style thing where you see sketches of representation of that court event. And in the background, you're hearing actual recording, I'm assuming on a phone, and you're hearing the artist, the painter, talking to somebody and asking if she should approach the suspect. And that is kind of the kickoff for this whole documentary, in that the painter, and I'll try to get her name correct, I believe she's Czechoslovakian. She had been living in Berlin, and as of the time of this movie, she had moved and was living in Oslo, Norway when this occurred. Her name is Barbara. It's like Barbora, so not like the American Barbara. Barbora, and I want to say Krysilkova. Hopefully I didn't mess that up too bad. And the thief, one of the two thieves, the other one you don't really see much, but the one is the main subject. And his name is Karl, but he goes by Bertil. So a lot of times you'll hear him called Bertil or Karl Bertil. So she approaches him and asks if he will sit for her for a painting. And very quickly you see him doing just that, sitting there as she begins to sketch him and talk to him. And you would think, okay, well, where is this going? And that is kind of the whole strength of this movie, is you don't know where it's going. Just the fact that she approaches him in the first place is really fascinating. And in fact, I had a short interview with her, and I will drop in here a little bit of her reasoning, what kind of drove her to approach him as opposed to just letting him get convicted and go to jail, or wanting to have kind of that vengeful spirit of, hey, I want someone to get theirs because they took my property. Why did she approach him in this case?
It was a few months since the robbery until the trial happened. And then when I was approaching the courtroom, I came there with a certain thought that I wanted to actually approach both of the thieves and ask them to pose for me while recreating the crime scene of the thievery. So I was already coming there with the idea that I want to get to know them in a way, or to approach them whether they would pose for me, who of course had enormous curiosity about how do my thieves look like, who are they, I just wanted to help them to make it into a sense for me, to understand why they did what they did.
So the rest of the movie really is interesting in that it follows kind kind of this back and forth between the two. In the first, probably third, you're really seeing it from her perspective. Like, what does she think of this man? She is interested in, like, what has brought him to this point. What kind of life is he living? Her paintings, you will see throughout, they definitely they kind of have a very hyper-realistic style to them, but they're also stylized in the sense of the compositions and the poses are, very beautiful aesthetically. But some of the subject matter would be, to many people, not beautiful, or at least more disturbing than what they'd want to see in a painting, per se. The one of the pieces that was stolen, the swan song, is a dead swan in the grass, but it's very beautiful, but it's a dead swan. And in the same way, she seems to be fascinated by these aspects of humanity that people maybe don't want to look at or consider so deeply. And Bertil, in this way, is one of those people. We have many people in society who suffer from drug abuse, or have some criminal past. We can let them just fall through the cracks, or we can try to understand what those people are and how they got to that point and see them as human beings. And this movie goes a great deal towards that. Now, the second third is interesting because it switches, and you get his point of view. You even get some backtracking to some scenes that you've seen earlier, but more kind of from how he entered those scenes and what he was thinking in those scenes, as well as you get his perspective on her. And that's very fascinating because I think that as a viewer, you're probably considering her in one way, maybe more simplistically, just as the kind of, the painter, the one who, interprets the world through paintings. But he is kind of looking at her much more as a human and interested in her. He's suspicious of her motives, but he's also interested in her motives. And then all this would seem rather dry, but it is not. This takes over a period of over 3 years. And the ups and downs in both of their lives, but especially Bertil's life, are pretty severe. And a lot of very dramatic events occur. Not always between them, but sometimes just in their lives. Which makes this, just as a story, fascinating. But when you get to the deeper levels of what's happening with these two people, these human beings, it also is very fascinating. And it has a really neat bow it ties on the end. There's kind of a final shot that is very, very satisfying for a movie. It isn't absolutely necessary to enjoy this movie, but it definitely gives you a little, I guess, kind of a, like I said, like a bow tie at the end. What would I rate this movie? I would say, for me, this is definitely probably about a 4.5 star. It's really, really good documentary. Like, I would say that the only thing I could see that might even make it better, and I thought about this at the time, is that I could almost see this being like one of those 28 Up or 7 Up type movies. If you're familiar with that series, a documentary, and I believe back in the 50s, maybe the 60s, he got a group of children that were 7 years old in England, and he interviewed them all about their lives and their dreams and their hopes and their thoughts about what they were going to be and what they wanted to be. And then every 7 years in their lives, he's been following them, coming back to them, and if he can find them all, seeing where they're at and what's happened. So I could see, you're so invested and so interested in these two human beings in this movie, I could see something like that occurring with this. I could see 10 years down the road, where is the painter and the thief? Are they still a painter and a thief? I mean, that alone kind of reduces them to types, whereas the film that we have here does something different. It really shows them as complete and complex human beings, which I think is, once again, a real strength and something you don't see in a lot of documentaries, and that is really showing that kind of that broad spectrum of what being a human in this world is all about. So that being said, once again, it's a great documentary. I would definitely check it out. It should be out there by the time you see this. And I may drop another little mini video later with some more pieces of an interview that I did with her. And I will leave this with a little quote from Barbara and on the screen here, and a little bit of her artwork. And below I will link to her page where she has her showings and art Also, I will have a link down there for Deepest Dream, where there's more information about this. We post more information about this movie and other movies, as well as our podcast link, which is the Movie Mainline. Hope you enjoyed this, and we'll have something more for you soon.